Have you ever seen something for sale and thought, I have to have it? Well, you're not alone. See, back in the early 20th century, there was one product that dominated the minds of the modern consumer. It was so impactful that it actually helped break down the walls of America's once rigid class structures. Hi, my name is Gabe Bauer, and this is Top Shelf History, where we combine great stories with great drinks. This is the Tin Lizzie. It is the cocktail I have made for you today based on the Model T Ford, a car that changed the car manufacturing world and launched a new wave of vehicles that would be affordable for the everyman. It is a drink that is made with champagne, Jägermeister, and Jack Daniels. Prior to the emergence of the Model T, cars were a luxury item running on the most novel technology. In 1885, Carl Benz designed the first practical automobile that ran on an internal combustion engine. That same year, Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach actually patented the first gasoline engine that would be the blueprint for the modern gasoline engine today. 4 years after that, Panhard and Levasseur became the first car manufacturer breaking onto the scene in France. Just 2 years following, a modern car manufacturer that we recognize today, Peugeot, also found their way into the car manufacturing business. And these were cars that were made for the wealthiest of people. That is until 17 years later, when Henry Ford broke onto the scene. Henry saw what the car landscape was in front of him. He knew how his competitors were making their big bucks, and he knew what was going to be successful for them. At the time, it was luxury, but Henry saw a different vision for cars in the future. He wanted to make a car for the everyman, and so he designed the Model T, and he worked on it for years. And by 1908, he was finally able to produce his first car and present it to the public. It was priced at $850. Now, in today's money, that's around $26,000. And you may sit there and say, Gabe, I think Henry Ford may need to rethink what the car for the everyman is at that price. But even by 1908 standards, this was one of the cheapest cars on the market. Most of his competitors were selling cars around $2,000 to $6,000. I mean, and that's for the good cars. You could find cars that were cheaper, but they weren't nearly as good or dependable, let's say. But they were all customizable. To put it into modern day terms, $2,000 to $6,000. That's $63,000 to $188,000. So on the low end would be like a brand new Tesla Model S, and on the higher end would be like a Lamborghini. So I think Henry was starting to get it right. The next thing he had to figure out was how to make the manufacturing process far more efficient to bring the costs down. In the car manufacturing world, what separated everybody else from the rest was customization, and Henry knew he had to take customization out of the process to make it cheaper. He studied assembly lines through the slaughterhouses, or should I say probably disassembly lines in the slaughterhouses, in order to break the making of a car down into 84 individual steps. Then he made sure that every single piece was identical and interchangeable, so that if there was an error or if one was broken, it could be swapped out easily and it would fit every single time. This was a completely new idea to making cars, as it standardized the process and it made it a lot cheaper. So efficient was this new way of making a car that Henry Ford was able to cut end-to-end production from 12 hours to make one car to 93 minutes. And by 1924, by the end of the Model T and the emergence of the Model A, the Model T was cut down from $850 to $260, which in today's money is around $4,400 for a brand new car. That's practically a down payment for a new car nowadays. Suddenly, cars weren't just accessible, they were affordable. And despite being deprived of what would normally be considered a luxury, the very fact that people could get these cars brought a sense of luxury to the average consumer. Ford Motor Company also worked to elevate their workers by setting new wage standards. For an 8-hour shift, Ford would pay their employees $5 a day, almost doubling the industry standards. And this was a win-win for Henry Ford because not only would he be able to retain skilled laborers and employees, they would also now be able to afford the very cars that they made, thus expanding his consumer base. It was a no-brainer. And as Henry Ford set these new wage standards, he also expanded the middle class, something that other industries were starting to take note. And although Henry Ford is known for the making of the Model T, I believe it's his impact on the workforce that perhaps is the most impactful part of his legacy. So at the Ford Motor Company, you built cars. At Top Shelf History, we build drinks. So let's get into our drink, the Tin Lizzie. We're gonna start off with a highballer glass that we're then going to fill up with some ice. Now, this is just gonna be a great drink here. Now, we wanna fill this all the way up because we're gonna have a decent amount of liquor in here, after all. Now, when I was going into this particular drink, I was thinking, all right, let's do exactly what Henry Ford did. We're gonna take something luxurious, we're gonna take something foreign, and then we're gonna bind them together into the middle class for a drink that everybody can enjoy. And so for that, we're gonna start off with some Jägermeister, because after all, the modern gasoline engine, the first practical automobile that ran on an internal combustion engine, started with a German, Carl Benz, Gottlieb Daimler, Wilhelm Maybach, they're hard names to pronounce. I think it's necessary that we include a little German spirit here. So with some Jägermeister, we pour in, we're gonna put in 1 1/4 ounces. Now I'm very particular on the 1/4 ounce because I think we want the Jägermeister to be able to come through just right. We don't want it to be hidden behind any of the other flavors that's gonna be going on. Next, we're going to equally put in our middle class in this drink, and I think the everyman, at least in terms of maybe a whiskey, Jack Daniels, right? I mean, it's a staple, and I think for the modern American consumer, you can consider it like the middle class whiskey. It's a classic. So we're gonna put in 1 1/4 ounces of Jack Daniels whiskey in here as well. And these two flavors are going to play well together, I think, because you get the smokiness of the Jack Daniels, you get the sweet tart anise of the Jägermeister. They actually play pretty well together. And so we're going to then just stir this up with my handy dandy spoon. Oh yeah. You can already see the ice is melting a little bit, so we may want to add just a little bit more. There we go. And then we're going to top this off with perhaps the most classy part of our drink, the more luxurious part, because after all, we have the German element, we have the American middle class element, but now we need the fancy French element, because after all, it was the French who were the first car manufacturers, and because cars back in the day were so luxurious, we want something that's also luxuriously French. And what is better than Saint Ren Brut, you know, a little bit of champagne for us, you know? So, oops, there we go. Took the top off without the top. We're just going to top this off here with some Brut. This is going to give it some bubbliness. This is going to give it some fruitiness. It's going to cut through all that syrupy, bold flavors between our Jägermeister and our Jack Daniels. It's going to really balance everything out. It's going to look delicious. And it already looks pretty good as is. But after all, this is the Tin Lizzie. And I don't know about you guys, that looks like a good drink. Almost like a, you know, Long Island, or Coke, or an iced tea. But we need this to look like a Ford Model T. And for that, we turn to our garnish. Now, we made this garnish, which has a lime that is followed on each side with some delicious Luxardo or Amareno cherries. Now, I don't know about you guys. If you can't see the Ford Model T with the grille and the two headlights, I don't know what you're looking at. You should see it. There's a lot of thought that went into this. And on top of that, we go to our Tin Lizzie. And I think that looks like a drink I want to have, and not necessarily a car I want to drive because I don't think it will run well, but it looks fantastic nonetheless. And I think it perfectly tops off our Tin Lizzie drink. So let's give it a try. Now, looking at this, I don't want my Tin Lizzie garnish to smack me in the face. We don't want a car crash around here. I'm sorry. So in order to avoid that, we're just going to take our little garnish and stick it on in, get all those nice little flavors melded in with our delicious Brut and Jägermeister and Jack Daniels. They all get to know each other, and now we give it a taste. The first thing you taste, of course, is going to be that Brut, especially if you float it on top. If you mix it a little bit, you start to get the other flavors. If you don't, you're still going to get the Jägermeister and the Jack part on the back end. It's nice and sweet, very refreshing up front, like I said, from that champagne. Then you get the sweet, tangy anise from the Jägermeister, plus that delicious smokiness from the Jack Daniels. It's a really, really well-balanced drink. It just tastes like the middle class. I don't know, but it tastes really, really good. Certainly a drink I think anybody could enjoy on a summer day. Maybe you're out on a drive in your brand new Ford with your windows down. Don't drink and drive though, that's a horrible idea, but you understand my sentiment here. Great drink, certainly one that I think everybody could enjoy. The everyman's drink. And that sounds like last call. So one of the cool things about Henry Ford was his relationship with Thomas Edison. As something that I alluded to in the show itself is that Henry Ford actually worked at the Edison Illuminating Company of Detroit. And the two met for the first time at a convention in New York, the Association of Edison Illuminating Companies of New York. It's a whole mouthful. But Thomas Edison and Henry Ford met very briefly while they were at that convention, and Henry Ford loved Thomas Edison. He was almost his idol. It sounds a bit extreme, but he just adored Thomas Edison as an inventor, and Edison gave encouraging words to Henry Ford over the development of his quad cycle. Edison, in his mind, thought that electric cars were the future of transportation, something that is proving more true as we go on today here in 2022. But at the time, the two shared a relationship that was so genuine. They really enjoyed being together with each other. They enjoyed each other's minds in the fact that they were both inventors and they had very particular visions of the future. Edison's encouragement of Henry Ford as he went about making the Ford Motor Company and developing his vehicles was a big thing for Henry to continue fighting and developing his cars so that he could essentially tear down what was a really high wall of entry into the car manufacturing world. The relationship between the two lasted so long that they ended up becoming vacation neighbors, buying homes right next to each other in Fort Myers, Florida, which still stand to this very day. I've actually visited them myself. They're very cool properties, but it's really cool to see that two major players in the world that shaped America during the 19th century and early 20th century were actually best friends, and Thomas Edison and Henry Ford. And it's even funnier to me that Henry Ford actually worked for Edison's company. So it just seemed like a proper relationship was going to form between the two. They both had very clear visions, and it's really cool to see that they were able to enjoy each other's company. It said that they actually went on long drives together in Ford's cars, and they would go camping. Just a cool little tidbit of how two great minds at the turn of the 20th century came together to become friends and leaders within America. Thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to check out any of our other historically inspired cocktails, you can find them here, or you can also find them at topshelfhistory.com. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share here, as well as join our community on Locals. You can also find us at Rumble. We talk about so many different cool things on our Locals channel, so please think about joining us there. But from all of us here at Top Shelf History, remember, history is better with a drink. Cheers.